You may not have thought it could happen, but things are a lot quieter in Narragansett these days. Oh, those crazy kids, they're nuts, they're terrors, they're torture. But you know what? A little bit of effort and things are better, quality of life. They have the data to prove it, and the police chief and town manager are here to kind of follow up on some previous conversations we've had about it and let you know what the latest status report is. Good evening. Nice to have you in as we begin July. Where did June go? Why do the summer months seem to go so quickly? Because you're having fun. Time flies. When, right? Thanks for checking into my state of mind. Program note. Beginning on Monday of next week, we will have a third airing of the broadcast. You know that you watch this program either at 7:30 or 11:30 on MyRI TV. Beginning on Monday, there will be a third showing of the program, and that will be at midnight on Fox Providence. Okay, so immediately following Seinfeld and Family Guy, of course, after the 10 o'clock news and sports wrap on Fox Providence. So excited about that. 3 chances now to watch the show each night. All right, let's get to the rundown and cover a couple of things. Some contemporary with today, some we're catching up on based on some program schedules and shows that did not include rundowns over the last couple of nights. The first budget. Yes, the first budget. Well, it's the governor's first budget. Projo headline here. $8.7 billion, but not everybody is kind of getting along. Here's a short snippet of the governor's thoughts.
The world should know Rhode Island is a good place to do business, and this budget makes it easier and less expensive to do business. And it's time that we change the perception of this state, and this budget makes a huge step forward in doing that.
I fail to recognize that. I've had a respectful disagreement with the governor on this. While it chisels away, creates some incentives, and maybe takes a piece of bureaucracy or two away, the truth of the matter is there's no clarion call, nor is there some big billboard that we can put up out of Rhode Island that says, holy cow, what a change, come here and do some business. Show me where it is in the budget, and I'll eat my hat, or my words. All righty. In the budget, though, there's a thing that this governor could do to advocate not only for herself, but for the position of executive that 44 other states have, and it's called the line item veto. You know how that works. You remember your civics, right? The General Assembly, think about this. The process is the governor creates a budget, the General Assembly plays around with it and then passes the budget, and the governor has to decide whether to sign the whole budget or not. The governor would have a whole lot more power, authority, and the people would have a whole better quality of life if the governor, when she saw something she didn't like, could say, you know what, I like 98% of the budget, but this has got to go. I veto. And that would put the General Assembly on the hot seat to stand for a specific item as opposed to hide behind them all and the House Speaker. Ken Block, watchdogri.com, seems to be one of the only voices, he and Common Cause, out there saying it's about time that we made a change here.
They asked the General Assembly to put on the 2016 ballot the question, should Rhode Island's governor be empowered with the line item veto? And frankly, it's close to legislative malpractice to not allow that vote to occur. So Rhode Island is one of 6 states in the country that does not empower its governor with a line item veto, and that is outrageous.
Some 1,300 people signed a petition that Block put out trying to get some momentum on this. It reminds me of the early days of the master lever, an argument that he, along with others, worked hard on and finally won. We have an opportunity to change this in 2016. Simply, the General Assembly has to vote itself, not an easy thing, right, by a 50+1 majority to put it on the ballot in 2016, and then by a 50+1 majority, the people can say, yeah, I want the line item veto. While it's going to be pulling teeth in the General Assembly to get them to acquiesce to this, it's all about the pressure that you put on. I project that it'll be a 70% plurality amongst those who vote for it or on it. So let's get going on this. We need it. And finally, in terms of the budget and the legislation, the question is, are they done? Here's the headline that kind of feeds the question. They're still at odds over the tolls, no doubt, and Eyewitness News has a little bit of a follow-up as to what really didn't get done.
We warned folks that we were running out of time. Unfortunately, the pace was very slow. We were very slow at reaching agreement on issues that were not very consequential.
Mattiello says some of the more consequential bills include the charter schools and hemp bills, and there's also a bill about chicken coops that passed the House, but hit a roadblock in the Senate.
That was near the end, but that was just after a long list of slow negotiations.
Both the House and Senate are now in recess. The House is coming back in the fall to continue with their session, but in a statement, their spokesman says, "We are disappointed that some issues were left unresolved, such as the Good Samaritan overdose bill."
Yeah, so the Senate doesn't want to come back. The House wants to come back. The House wants to come back and work on the tolls, the truck tolls primarily, and maybe the PAWSOX. The Senate says, well, we already did the truck tolls, so we don't want to come back. We like our version. And then there's these other not so miscellaneous pieces of legislation like the charter schools, which were untended. You may have seen the show on Friday that we did last week, a good debate on that matter. It's left kind of as a jump ball. So all that's going on. But here's another thing that a governor can do. A governor in 34 states across this country can call the legislature back on an item of interest, has the power and the authority to do that. Let's get the line item veto first, and we'll work on that as well. We didn't get a chance to opine on this big deal that the Supreme Court of the United States of America voted on last week. Certainly you've heard about it.
With a crucial swing vote, the court decided 5-4. It requires every state to recognize same-sex marriages and issue marriage licenses for gay couples. President Obama praised the decision. He spoke at the White House after the ruling came down, commenting on the long road to get here.
And then sometimes there are days like this, when that slow, steady effort is rewarded with justice that arrives like a thunderbolt.
The Supreme Court ruling comes more than 2 years after Rhode Island legalized same-sex marriage in a grand ceremony at the State House.
The president's making me giggle a little bit. Does anybody recall what the president's position was on same-sex marriage when he first got elected? Right, he didn't support it. So is that winds of change, and political winds I'm talking about, or is that conviction? I'm thinking it's the former, not the latter. As we look at this headline, I have one more thought. With the headlines that were all across America, here's my prediction on this thing. We are going to start to see some conservative states say, you know what, we don't like this so much that we're going to get out of the marriage business altogether. You're going to find that marriage will be a choice for the church, and that civil unions will be the extent to which some states will actually offer some kind of a license, which will send the whole conversation into another social, cultural tizzy. Mark my words. Speaking of a tizzy, it's kind of hard to figure out who says what and who thinks what and what segment of what population thinks it's a good idea to give Cuba a hug, easy for me to say. But the CNN.com headline right now reads, yes, today, after some 50 years plus, we've got this love fest now, embassies going up. Here's the latest from CBS.
The U.S. will be sending an ambassador to Cuba for the first time since 1961, 2 years after Fidel Castro's revolution.
You can't hold the future of Cuba hostage to what happened in the past. And that's what this is about, a choice between the future and the past.
The U.S. and Cuba have been negotiating to reestablish embassies following a surprise announcement in December that secret talks had led to an agreement to restore diplomatic relations.
This is a historic step forward in our efforts to normalize relations with the Cuban government and people. Nobody expects Cuba to be transformed overnight. But I believe that American engagement through our embassy, our businesses, and most of all through our people is the best way to advance our interests and support for democracy and human rights.
You know, you get a shoulder shrug and some nonchalant disposition from a lot of Americans. There are Cubans, a lot of them in Florida, who are livid with the president about human rights on this. Businesses see profit opportunities, so they're quietly saying, hey, this is great. But there is a worry amongst, people who understand diplomacy that America has sent a message, which is, it doesn't matter how you behave, we'll hug you one way or the other eventually. Your state of mind is important to us. Give us a ring, 228-1886. Email us, Facebook post, tweet at your leisure. Here's a kind of nice little follow-up to the program we had on June 1st about migraines and the devastation of migraine headaches. Nice little celebration at the State House, keeping the awareness of how important it is to find a cure and some consensus on how that's a really important disease to focus on. All right, when we come back, things are better in Narragansett. We'll talk to the chief and the town manager and find out why. Stay with us. Alrighty, so you remember the videos of not this past school year, but the end of school year prior, where all heck was breaking loose down in Narragansett, and I guess they finally had that one big party where everybody said, "All right, that's it, ball game. We got we got to do something about it." And Pamela Nolan and Chief Dean Hoxie are here, the Chief of Police and the Town Manager. Welcome, nice to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming all the way up from Narragansett to these
up.
Providence
It's a long
studios.
way, yes.
Right? It was that one party where everyone just kind of said, "All right, that's it."
That really raised it to a new level for us. You know, I called it a riot because what do you call bottles throwing through the air? And we had, it was just disturbing, and the residents were disturbed to another level than they had ever been before.
Yeah, and over 30 years being on the police department in Narragansett, it was clearly the worst incident we'd had. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was the final incident for the residents, and they'd had enough. And rightfully so, from what happened down there.
Well, it's interesting that we have you up here. There's no real urgency to bring you on, other than the Landlord Association, who was on last time around. I had a couple of messages. They're not happy with some of the proposals, the financial proposals that are running around. And Pam, maybe you can kind of update us on that. We'll talk about that coming up here in a second. I don't want to rub it in URI's face. I mean, I'm a URI dad. Everybody knows I'm involved with URI Sports as a public address announcer. But it wouldn't impact how I objectively think about that party. And I give the credit to the university. They were as exhausted and offended by that last big one as anybody. At least they said all the right things, correct?
Oh, I agree.
You got a good relationship with the school.
We have a better relationship with the school now than we did before the party. I think it kind of got everybody to come together and put our heads in. I was pretty new. I was only a year, had been there only a year, and what I said was, I need to know the history of this. I need to know what's going on. And we put together the university and the town and some townspeople, the chief and I, and went to work to see what we could do to make it better.
And did what specifically?
Well, I'll let Dean talk about how much police enforcement has improved, because truly what works, and we found it out, is police enforcement. But other than that, we've also leaned hard on the university, and they've leaned hard on their students to prepare them for an oncoming semester when they first arrive, to let them know what the rules are in Narragansett and what the chief is going to do with his police force and the ordinances are in Narragansett. What we're really asking for from these kids is respect your neighbors. It's simple. That's what we want. They're coming into full-blown, mature neighborhoods.
Right.
And they have people who live there, pay high taxes, pay Narragansett
What's the
taxes.
breakout of ratio of year-round residents to those population of kids that come in
we have
September
about
through May?
17,000 year-round, and we have about 7,000 kids.
Yeah, 6,000 or 7,000 students that live off. There's almost a third of the houses in Narragansett now are rental properties. There's over 2,200, 2,400 rental properties in Narragansett, which is a pretty significant amount.
Sure.
About a third.
All right. So what did you do?
Well, what we did was we increased our enforcement, just the sheer numbers. That first weekend, we spent $20,000 in overtime. We had 20 officers from our department. We had members of the Rhode Island State Police, South Kingstown Police Department, and we saturated the worst neighborhood that we have, which is Eastwood, Look North and South. And it had a great impact for the rest of the school year. It kind of set a tone. Some of the ordinances the town passed, tow zones,
Fines.
increased fines. All of our fines now are $500, payable by mail, possession of alcohol, open container, urinating in public. All of the things that lead to the resident complaints, the full-time resident complaints.
The fines are paid by whom?
Well, we'd like to think they're paid by the students.
The offenders.
But probably in reality, I would imagine either their parents pay them, or sometimes what happens when you ticket a house.
Yeah, well, an orange sticker on a house and the subsequent violation, that's $500 per resident of the house.
So if 6 kids live in there, it's
$3,000 in
$3,000.
fines. The university...
Landlords aren't picking that up.
No.
I'm
No,
sure
that's-
they've got in
that's
their
handed on.
contracts, and you know they're indemnified from
Right.
that situation,
Right.
right?
That's handed down to the renters.
Have you ever had non-payment and then had to pursue the landlords, or you know, where do you go from there?
Well, we have an ordinance for public nuisance ordinance or a reclamation ordinance that allows us, if there is a subsequent event at a house, and it's a major event, the renters and the property owner are jointly and severably liable for any costs. So it's a cost recovery ordinance. And we would bill for the number of police officers, fire trucks, DPW, you know, Green Lane, we had to have street sweepers and whatnot come out. So that's when it gets handed off to the actual owner of the home. Prior to that, it's the student renter.
Puts a lot of pressure on the landlords to do some diligence on who it is they're renting to. Yes.
That's a
I mean, they should be
huge
doing that
part-
anyway,
It's a
but-
huge part of the problem. Before the landlord group formed, and that was just since the major incident that we had, we didn't have that seat at the table filled. That was an obvious absence. The landlords, because they have a great big part in this, and how those students are going to act and what their leases say. We can talk about how much the town of Narragansett is paying to control these situations. I think our police force is probably 10 officers bigger than it might be if we didn't have 7,000 university students living in town. We spent, as Dean pointed out, the first night with those 22 cars out on the road that night, $20,000. And what I, as a town manager, see, making a budget, is dollars rolling down the street. It works. Enforcement is what works. We also hire minimum housing officers to enforce our ordinances. 2 of them, part-time. They're each 19 hours, but there's 2 of them. And the council has backed all this. The council has backed hiring 1 more police officer and 1 more minimum housing officer after those May 3rd riots that we had. So we're spending money, and it's working.
Well, I'm guessing, we'll talk about this when we come back, there might be some students who are actually relieved. You know, quality of life is not just something that starts when you're 40. And also the landlords still have some calculations that they're making, and they're not so happy about some things. We'll talk about it when we come back. Stay with us.
On the left-hand side there is the total, 100% is 100% of rental properties in Narragansett, which is about this year 2,740. We looked at total police responses, and back in '09 it was about 7%. That's gone up to 10% this year. Police will go out to a problem and they don't take any action. That was about 4% of the total calls. And 2% was the actual nuisance homes that got the orange stickers. That 2% is the big focus. Where are the nuisance homes? And that's dropped to under 2% now, as of these statistics.
There was a big crackdown after the big party last year. I mean,
Well,
we covered it here. You know, there was a whole big to-do.
There
I'm
was,
told
and
it's a lot quieter this year.
It's had a real effect.
Look at 40 shirts.
Same issue.
Same shirt, same issue. That's a good one. That was Ray Kagels, who was the guy who came here back on April 30th last year to talk to us about this. And you know, he's throwing out data that look, it's getting better, it's getting better, it's getting better. You also have getting better data. Can we post that, Steve? And so back in 2012, 2013, and 2013, 2014, that's a lot of noise complaints, But then after you crack down, September 2014, go back up to the top there, folks. 106 noise complaints. January of this year, 9. It was cold.
It was cold.
It was cold.
Weather was definitely
no one was
factor.
running around, you know. But even in May, when you get that spring fever, obviously that data is down considerably. So I congratulate you on whatever the heck you did. You just explained it to calm that thing down. I bet you there are students that are relieved in Narragansett.
Sure.
Yes?
Sure. They have problems where they will host a small gathering of their friends, and with social media the way it is nowadays, next thing they have 100 kids show up at their house that they don't want. And we often tell them to call us, that we will come, break up the party. They're not going to get in trouble because they called us for help.
Yeah.
And that we will do that.
Well, it's good for you to say that publicly, because that's the kind of cooperative policing that I'm sure everyone wants to see, and maybe not everybody knows about. Tell me about the landlord group, though. They were feeling very good about what you had done to calm the scene, but now you've got some tax issues there that not everybody's happy about, right?
Well, I think when Ray Kegels and I talked one day, and I said, you know, I really did say to Ray, I think what we need is a landlord group. And he took off with that. He literally took off with that. And he's got a group now. They call it the 2100 group.
Yep.
And that's for the number of landlords. And he's got a very good, very large group that will show up when they need him to. And they have helped us to regulate the problem. The famous Cinco de Mayo party, it was always famous in Narragansett. And it always culminated with house furniture burning out on lawns. We're going to have that this year because they walk the streets, they work with all the landlords work with their tenants,
but you've looked at the landlord community to help pay for this problem, correct?
No,
well,
not at all.
Well, there's a perception, some landlords
no,
tell me that...
there's a couple of committees that would like to see that happen, and they'd like to see, we have two very active committees that would like to see people who rent be at a different tax rate than people who do not.
That's what I'm talking about.
We don't think that's constitutional.
Okay.
It may be.
So it's a proposal. It's not
nothing.
headed toward law.
Believe me, this is a long way, and many
It's vapor.
meetings,
Okay.
many public meetings away from being real, because that's to some people doesn't seem constitutional. It would be.
Meaning 2 tiers of
Well,
tax.
we have 2 tiers now. We have commercial and we have
Commercial and
residential.
Everybody is.
And the state of Rhode Island now allows one more tier, and that's where they'd like to put it. There's another group that would like to do the Homestead Act, and if you rent, you get a different tax rate. And this is circulating among, we get a lot of calls in my office, and we handle it because I tell them, keep your eye on the papers, keep your eye on our website for meetings, because these ideas are going to take a lot of meetings before they become reality.
The dialogue needs to go on.
Yes.
The chief, you're probably just an observer on this one, but tell me what you think about the state's latest move on taxation that involves a lot of people who have rental property in your fine town and the like.
Well, in our town, it really was opposed loudly.
No kidding.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I'm glad that it was withdrawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it didn't seem fair, especially in our town. As Dean pointed out,
Well, it's
how
the
many
economic
people,
engine.
It is an economic engine.
And people do make
yes.
decisions on $1,000 or $1,050, you know, here and there to rent a property. I mean, it's such a cultural, economic rhythm in Narragansett. You hate to see that disrupted or make it non-competitive, right, with the rest of the vacation world out there, Cape Cod, the lake, everything else.
Right.
So it's nice to have some public officials in, not have a massive confrontation or what the hell are you doing type of thing. Things are better in Narragansett.
They're
Things
better.
are good with URI,
Yes.
and everyone's at peace.
Well, we can improve our relationship
more
with
peaceful,
URI.
more peaceful, yeah. Right?
Am I not right, Dean? We can improve our relationship with URI, but I've seen a real willingness to work with us.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we've made strides this past school year to really help the neighborhoods improve their quality of life. And the residents deserve every bit of the effort we've put forward. I mean, some folks have been there living in those neighborhoods the 30 years I've been on the department.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they deserve it to turn around and have a little bit better peace and quiet, particularly on the weekends.
All right, well, there you go. So the message is, come to Narragansett, invest in Narragansett. Don't be afraid of those URI kids.
No, we have a wonderful town. We really do. It's just a great place to come.
All right, good to see you.
All right,
Thanks for
thank
coming
you.
in. Chief, appreciate it.
Thank you very
Good
much.
work. One more thing when we come back. Stay with us. What a gorgeous day for the second day of the CBS yesterday, huh? There's Keegan Bradley helping to advance his win for he and his partner, John Curran. The CBS, what an incredible event, a jewel of Southern New England and Rhode Island. Another jewel, the Paw Sox, and controversy surrounding it tomorrow night. See you on the radio at noon on WPRL. Good night.